Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tablas Creek semi-weekly Instagram Live broadcast. I am, as always, Jason Haas. Coming to you inside today. I don't really like to be outside on our patio, but we are in day 9 of a pretty intense heat wave. I retreated inside. It's about 102 out right now. I will be having this conversation from inside. My guest this week is Patrick Bennett, who is the new president and CEO of Vineyard Brands, the import company that my dad founded more than 50 years ago. And Patrick's one of my favorite people in the business. So I'm excited for him that he has this new gig. And I'm excited for you all to get to meet him. But as I always do, while I'm waiting for people to join, I want to share a few pictures of what is going on out at Tablas. The big thing is that we're seeing some ripening. So a picture of just what the vines look like. Everything is still very green, though the hillsides have turned gold. You may notice, if you look closely in the middle of this picture, that is in fact a bald eagle on top of one of our owl boxes. It flew away before I got close enough to get a really good picture, but you can see the head. I thought it would be fun to check in on the progress of the different varieties that we have, different white varieties. So we have 5 main white varieties. So I'll start with Viognier, which is the most advanced. These are basically full-size Viognier grapes. They haven't started veraison yet. There is a veraison in white grapes as well as red. The grapes will turn this kind of yellowier color rather than this deep green. Viognier is likely to be first into veraison, but we're still at least a couple weeks out, maybe a little more than that. In addition, we've got Marsanne. You can see Marsanne's a little smaller berries. They're sort of large, like almost marble-sized, but not full-sized yet quite. On the other hand, Grenache Blanc is full-sized. Super big, tight clusters. Looks great. Grenache Blanc always looks super happy and healthy. And then we've got Roussanne. These are smaller clusters, so even though the berries look pretty big, it's just because I've zoomed in more. These are basically pea-sized, still growing. And we've got, finally, Big Pool. Sorry, that was not that. Choose different asset. Big Pool. So those are our main white grapes. Things are looking good. There is a little bit of damage from this heat wave. One of the things that we worry about is direct heat, particularly sun on the clusters, will lead to sunburn, where you get actual physical damage of the boundaries between the cell walls, and that allows the liquid to escape, and you end up with these kind of hard, dry, sour raisins. I would estimate we're somewhere in the 5 to 15% loss range, which is not insignificant, but it's not terrible either. And one of the good things about sunburn at this stage is that these raisins will all fall off. It doesn't impact your quality at all, just your quantity a little bit. And given that it was going to be a pretty plentiful vintage anyway, we have a little bit of quantity to spare. But we are looking forward to the heat breaking on Friday. Otherwise, we're trying to keep people cool on our patio as well. We've moved a lot of our tastings inside. And then in the cellar, we have been putting together the blends on the 2023 red. So I wrote about the blending decisions that we made a month or so ago, but where the wines are now physically getting put together in conjunction with us bottling those 2022s. So that's it. That is what's going on at Tablas. I am going to ask Patrick to join. I look forward to you all getting to spend some time with it. I know I'm looking forward to it too. Hello, my friend.
Hi, Jason.
How are you? I hear some wind in your background. It looks
It's breezy. It's hot and breezy here in sunny New Jersey.
Lovely. That's why I'm inside, because it is hot and not breezy here in sunny California.
Heard. I'm also in the shade, which is nice because it's like 90 degrees and like 95% humidity here.
Yeah. I don't know if that's worse than 106 and 20% humidity, but probably.
I think they say the humidity is the real deal breaker, but I don't actually know.
My response to the people who are like, well, it's a dry heat is always, yeah, so's an oven.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. So I like to start by asking people to Talk a little bit about their path into wine. Like, was wine on your family table growing up, or did you come to it later? How did it happen?
No, there was definitely no wine, and actually like very little alcohol on my family table growing up. Um, I worked in restaurants to put myself through college, so that's how I was initially introduced to wine. And in the late '90s, wine was still very emergent in the U.S., as you know, kind of growing up in the same time period. So just working in restaurants, I got exposed to wine. I really liked wine. I liked the idea of wine. I liked the kind of the intersection of history and science and alcoholic beverage, all together, and like pairing on the table. So I was working. I went to Rutgers in New Jersey, and I was working at a really cool restaurant. And the owner was a really nice guy, and he basically saw that I was curious about wine, and he said, "Hey, you can just run the wine list." So I would take the train from New Brunswick, New Jersey, into New York, and go to the wine boat tastings, and taste a ton of wines, and then come back and put them on the list, and then sell them myself. So that's how I initially got into it. And then I bought Kevin Zraly's book, I know that you're familiar with, and probably a lot of people are familiar with. And in my free time, I would just read that for fun. And then Rutgers offered to seniors like a 1-credit wine class, just kind of for fun again. So I took that. And then again, it was more like a hobby at that point. But then I was going to grad school for education. And again, I was working in restaurants to try to, fund that. And again, a restaurant manager who I was working with was like, "Hey, do you want to just run this wine program?" And this was a much more substantial French-focused wine program, like 500 wines. And then after that, that was the summer before grad school was actually slated to start. And then by the end of the summer, I dropped out of grad school, which I hadn't even started, and enrolled into sommelier school and started in the fall as my first sommelier class.
Cool. Did you have an aha wine? Was there a wine that you tasted? You were like, oh man, like I get what people are talking about.
So it's like much later in my journey into wine when I had this like special wine that we all talk about, like the aha wine. So I was already a sommelier for 2 or 3 years. I had already transitioned I was trying to be a science teacher initially. I had already transitioned from that career path into the wine career path. But I had a really good friend of mine who had been in the wine industry for many years and was a big Bordeaux collector. And he had lived in New Orleans and Washington, D.C. He knew your dad. He probably knew Danny. And one time he opened a bottle of 1929 Chateau Ozone for me. And like, picture 3 adult men hovering around like the wine bottle and wine glasses, like just inhaling like this and waiting for the wine to die, And the wine just kept getting better and better and better, more perfumed and more aromatic. And it was like, we drank it over the course of 2 hours, and it was like a really amazing experience. And I was like, I'm never leaving this industry ever. Because it's like, what else can give you this experience,
So cool. And I love that you talk about that intersection of like history and science and place and alcoholic beverage. Like that Venn diagram is a pretty cool one.
Totally, right? Yeah.
So you spent like more than a decade, like 15 years or so, in that somm restaurant kind of greater New York world.
Yeah. 11 years.
What was that like?
Pretty intense. That's a good way to describe it. Like 80-hour weeks. Occasionally 90-hour weeks. The average week was like 65 hours. But it's like a cultural thing too, because it's your work, but it's also your passion. So, like running the business at the winery, like you love it. So you really put yourself into it and you do the best that you can because it benefits the business, but it's also fulfilling to you. So being a somm in New York is very similar. The people that are in the industry in New York, they're there because they want to be there. They're there because they enjoy it. They're there because they're passionate about it. So it's very consuming, One of the good things about New York, because in my mind, New York is one of the real global epicenters of wine. You have the opportunity to be exposed to wines from all over the planet. Like any wine that's made in the world can find its way to New York. But then also, there's so many importers. You have the opportunity to like really, the education potential is really high, I went on so many wine trips to like crazy places all over the world. I had opportunities to meet winemakers from all over the world. I did harvest with, people that I met in New York. So it's a really good opportunity to learn and network,
And that was the era which you first came out to Tablas, right? I mean, that was when we first met.
Yep.
Back,
Yep. Totally.
when was that? 2010 or 2011 or something like that?
2007. 2007, actually.
Holy
Yeah.
cow! What do you
I
remember?
met your dad. Your dad was still going on the road showing the Tablas Creek wines. So I met your dad, and he was like, "Oh, please come." And then when I came out, I met you for the first time.
Super cool. What do you remember about that first visit out here?
I remember that we tasted Tanat, and I bought it for the restaurant in New Jersey at the time, and it was the only place on the East Coast that I think you were selling Tanat in a restaurant, which was cool. But I remember we toured the nursery, which was amazing. And I don't know if I think the last time I was out, you guys reconfigured the nursery, and it's no longer serving the same purpose that it did 18 years ago, right? But I remember that because that was the first time for me to see actually how you guys would splice grapevines, which until you see it, it's like kind of a thing. It's hard to conceptualize, you see it on paper, but then when you see it, you're like, oh, it all makes sense. I remember the limestone soil because you basically walked up to a wall of rock and you like grabbed a piece of friable rock and broke it off. And we talked about like limestone and decomposing limestone and all these things and how it impacts your specific site in Paso Robles. I remember actually, because this was my first visit to Paso too, and I visited multiple properties, and then going from the eastern side of the appellation to the western side of the appellation, how different it really is, So that's something that's lasted with me for, close to 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we've maybe been assuming that people know what Vineyard Brands is. So I'll start the story and I'll let you pick it up from there. But for people who don't know, Vineyard Brands is an import company headquartered in Birmingham and New York, which my dad founded, sort of the outgrowth of a couple of other things that he had done, but he founded in 1973, so it was born the same year that I was. And it has only had 4 leaders in its 50-year history. And you are the fourth. So I'm curious, what was your first exposure to Vineyard Brands?
So when I was a buyer in New Jersey, John Crisatello, who I know who was the New Jersey Vineyard Brands sales manager, he actually lived like right up the street from the restaurant where I was working.
Uh-huh.
So he would come in often just to have a glass of wine, have lunch, and we connected. We forged a nice connection because he recognized that I was a super wine nerd. And I guess in New Jersey in the early 2000s, there weren't met too many of us in a professional context. So basically, we just started like working together pretty closely. And then over the years, when I transitioned to New York, I was consulting on some wine lists in New Jersey. So John and I never lost touch because when I needed a wine for a New Jersey wine list, when I was doing consulting work, I would just call him up, hey, John, I need something from Burgundy at this price point, or I need Premier Cru from this appellation, or I need, Pinot Grigio from Italy. And John would help me write these lists in the New Jersey context. And then it was 2017, I guess, when John was promoted from the New Jersey manager to a regional manager and was moving into New York, that he just picked up the phone one day and said, hey, Patrick, I'm looking to fill my role. You and I have always had a good history. Is this something that you would be interested in? So it was a surprise to me. And at the time, as I mentioned, I'd been a sommelier and wine director for 11 years. My wife and I were trying to start a family. I give like mad props and mad kudos to people in the hospitality industry that raise kids because it's really demanding. But that wasn't, our little apartment in Harlem, like I wasn't about like trying to raise kids in that while working nights, And Danielle, my wife, was also in the hospitality industry. So the Vineyard Brands opportunity just opened up kind of at the perfect time,
Yeah. And I think that drives a lot of people to move sort of out of the hands-on restaurant som world, is that you were talking about how encompassing the weeks are, but like it becomes even more so because like you're getting done at like late, like 10, 11, 12 at night, and you're generally like then going out with the people who you're working with. It's got to be such a hard life to have a family around.
It's amazing. I mean, I really give people credit for doing that.
So you sort of skipped the work for a distributor side of things that I feel like most people do in between working in the restaurant world and working for an importer or a winery. What was it like? What was it like wrapping your head around, like all of a sudden you're on the supplier side, going from buying to selling, and also navigating like these two big companies? You were in charge of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. New Jersey, Vineyard Brands was with Allied. Pennsylvania was with Southern. I mean, these are big companies, big hierarchies, big bureaucracies to deal with. What was that process like?
So, coming straight in from the hospitality side, I actually didn't even know that there was like a difference between distributors and importers. Like, and in terms of working, I mean, I knew like importers import wine and distributors distribute wine, like obviously, but I didn't like a lot of people said like, oh, like you're taking a supplier job now, and I really didn't know what they meant. You know what I mean? Because in my mind, it was just I was just transitioning from the hospitality side to the wholesale side. So to me, it wasn't like a big deal that I was skipping it in terms of like my like just internalizing it. That said, I had to like hit the ground running and learn as I went. So basically, like without exaggeration, I was working like 7 days a week for 2 years because I would be out doing sales calls with the reps and doing distributor meetings on the weekdays, and then on the weekends I was doing all my emails and just catching up from all my admin work that was piling up over the week. And I didn't really know what to expect. I just wanted to succeed, So I said, if it's going to take me like 7 days a week to get it done, then I'll do it. And it also, like coming from the hospitality industry where I worked weekends for 19 straight years, it felt weird not working on the weekends too. And also, most of my friends were working hospitality also, so they were working weekends anyways. So like, I would still have like a barbecue on a Monday with some of my industry friends, and it was like kind of like normal, right?
Cool. So then you spent the next 6 years building up Vineyard Brands business in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, including the whole like roller coaster of COVID. Um,
Yes.
so, wait, how did that impact? Obviously, it impacted everybody's lives in very direct ways, but how did that kind of roller coaster of COVID impact kind of the way that you approached your job?
To be completely honest with you, I mean, COVID was very challenging for lots of reasons, but for me professionally, COVID was not that disruptive. I had a really good account mix between Wine Access, which is a direct-to-consumer platform that I was calling on, and the PLCB and New Jersey. So I had a broad base of customers, and as foot traffic in stores slowed and as restaurants closed, DTC picked up.
Right.
So I had like a real kind of solid way to transition my business from one channel to another channel. So I was just very fortunate. It just happened to be that was my customer base, and it was conducive to a kind of a mid-COVID world.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I felt really grateful about in our own experience in COVID is the same thing. I mean, yeah, obviously restaurants closed, what we were selling wholesale shifted channels, but overall it was down whatever 15 or so percent in 2020. But at the same time, we saw this huge boom in wine club and direct to consumer sales, and because we already had a foothold in those places, it was relatively easy for us to just be like, okay, great, we'll pull this wine back from here and move it over here, and hey, wait, we're selling that way. So
Yeah.
and I guess given the retail focus of both New Jersey and Pennsylvania, that probably was a little easier for you than it was for a lot of
Totally.
people in.
Yeah, I felt really fortunate that a lot of my colleagues who are really restaurant focused, they had a much more challenging time, and that was never a huge part of my total business. So I wasn't as negatively impacted as some of my coworkers were, for sure.
Right. Okay, so fast forward to last summer when you were tapped to be the next leader of Vineyard Brands. I mean, I know when I heard that, my first thought was, huh, like that came out of the blue. And my second thought was, what an inspired choice. I'm wondering, like, what was your thought process as like when I guess it was Greg who reached out to you. What was your process?
I was like you. My first reaction was like, Greg, are you like punking me right now? Because I did not see it coming in like a million years. I thought I might progress over time with the company. And I thought like there was natural steps of progression that I would follow the path, but I didn't see that happening as immediately as it did happen. So Greg basically, he called me, he talked to me, he said, I've talked to all the board of directors, everyone has your approval if you want it, or everyone approves you if you're interested in the role. He said, I'll give you some time to think about it. Let's talk, in a few days. And then the next morning at like 8:59, he called me and he's like, so what's your answer? Which is kind of classic Greg, right?
Yeah. Think about it, but not too long.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, again, I'm not sure how much a lot of the people who are watching this will know, but one of Vineyard Brands' historic strengths is that, like, it has employees who measure their tenure in decades, and it has suppliers who've been with the company for like a half century or more. So I'm curious, like, how do you balance that like historic strength with being nimble and continuing to evolve, and like you're now managing people who've been at the company for 30 years? Like it's got to be a lot to approach.
So I think, and I probably should have addressed this earlier when you asked, how I came to Vineyard Brands. And it's definitely relevant to the conversation we're having now. But one of the special things about Vineyard Brands is the ESOP, which your dad set up. And we should definitely talk about the ESOP because that's very unique to Vineyard Brands culture and structure. And that's one of the main reasons that I personally came to the company, in addition to the fact that, I was kind of tapped to come in. But the ESOP is an employee stock ownership program. It's very rare in the wine space in the US. And it basically means that every employee at Vineyard Brands is also a partner in the company. And we're unique in that pretty much everyone that works here is personally invested in the success and the health of the company and in the success and the health of our supplier relationships and our business. And that's really rare in this space. And I think because of that, the people at Vineyard Brands really, from their heart, the bottom of their heart, they want the company to succeed and they want our suppliers to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, that is super critical. And that was really, for my dad, that was sort of his exit strategy. His exit strategy to invest in Tablas Creek. Like, he didn't really want to sell Vineyard Brands. He wanted Vineyard Brands to continue and to thrive and to set it up and give it the structure to do so. So, like, I believe he was the first person to do this with a business of that size in America. He saw
really?
he saw an ad in the Globe about this new IRS program that essentially allowed you to set up an employee stock ownership that would then buy that, essentially the equity from the founder, and then the founder could use that without having to pay capital gains taxes to invest in another American business. And so when he went and took it to his accountant was like, no, that's for like publicly traded companies. Like it's for much bigger companies than you. And my dad actually like read through the regulations. There's nothing in here that says that we can't do it at our size. But I guess every step of the way, he had to kind of be running it by the IRS to be like, is this okay? Like, is this? So it's really cool to see that it has worked out the way that it has, and that you still have so many people there who like were there when I started working with Vineyard Brands. When Tablas Creek got to the point that I was out here 22 years ago, there's still a big chunk of the team that was there, has been there ever since.
Yeah, I think it's our strength, really. I mean, I think it's awesome. To your earlier question about like how I don't even want to use the word manage. I don't think it's like how I lead them. I think it's more appropriate. I just try to lead, from the heart and like do the right thing, And everyone in a company and including you too, like in your intro, like everybody knows that I'm fully personally invested in wine and in Vineyard Brands and in our supplier relationships and in our supplier success. So like, I think because everyone knows that and senses that, they're more inclined to like really work collaboratively together, with me to get things done, And I think if you were to poll anyone in the company, they would all say that they're equally invested in Vineyard Brands as a company, as an entity, as a business, and in our suppliers, So it's not, I don't overthink it. to me, it's not really a hard managerial kind of decision making thing. It's just like just try to be the best leader that you can, and the people were already coming at things from the right place. So let's just do it together, you know.
Awesome. Love it. So I'm curious, like, are there things that you sort of have on your list of like, this is something new that I would like to implement, or a new thing that I'd like to augment in that Vineyard Brands has been doing, or what hasn't quite been doing yet, but I can see it doing?
So, Vineyard Brands was founded as a very kind of revolutionary import company, importing a lot of European wines that had never seen American soil, right? So I kind of want to get us back into that track, and just like bring in a few little bits and pieces to really make a more comprehensive and more attractive kind of nerdy somm portfolio, in addition to our strong recognized brands. So that's one thing on my list for sure. Secondly, I really am inspired by people like you and at Tablas Creek, and I'm not saying that because we're on this call right now. I mean, you genuinely know that, and I really want to find a way to kind of usher Vineyard Brands into a modern, sustainable, really like industry leading position in terms of environmental sustainability. So I haven't been able to like kind of mentally formulate what that means, or what that results in. But I've definitely been asking a lot of people. I've been trying to have conversations, and that's something that I definitely would love to do. Like, you guys are such a pioneer in sustainability in the industry, and I would love Vineyard Brands to like be on, not the same footing, because you guys are like way ahead of us, but like to kind of at least try to catch up to you a little bit, And again, at this point, I still haven't determined what some of those things are, but we're working towards it for sure. And Greg took us paperless in 2019, which maybe that's industry standard. I don't know, but at the time it wasn't for Vineyard Brands, so that was already a huge step in eliminating just tons of unnecessary waste.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think it's super exciting. I think there's all kinds of cool stuff that you do on the import side. And I can't wait to see where it takes you.
We're going to talk for sure.
So along those lines, you just got back from Beaucastel, right?
Yes. Yep.
And what did you think of their new building?
One, it's amazing, and I'll get into more details about why it's amazing. But two, it's like way behind schedule, which when we planned the trip, their initial like tentative opening date was July. So I was like, oh, I'll go end of June. I'll be there right before it opens. Everything will be ready. And then we got there, and it's like a construction site. So they're shooting for like September, October now. But what they've done is really incredible in terms of material, in terms of passive energy. They're using all native materials from like the surrounding soil to build the walls, the foundations. It's ancient building practices that they're essentially just repurposing for a completely modern winery. They're using the Mistral in conjunction with captured water to cool all of the cellars and winemaking rooms. It's just like a really kind of smart and visionary design. It's a special place. It's a special place. I can't wait till like it's done and the press can really see it, because you can go so many different directions with a big project like that. And they said like, how can we make this as close to nature as possible? In my mind,
And that for again, just to elaborate a little bit on one of the things you said, the kind of central, whatever, the core really of this building is this deep cistern that stays at constant temperature, and they've oriented it so that the building catches the Mistral, which is the prevailing wind that blows from the north, pushes it down over that cistern, cools the air, and then that air comes back up and becomes most of the cooling that the cellar needs, which I think is like, talk about like, use what you got. Like, I mean, that Mistral is it's pretty intense. I don't remember, but I remember hearing stories of my first visit to Beaucastel, I was like 5 months old or something. And my mom and dad drove in November, and the Mistral was blowing. It's a cold wind usually. And Jacques Perrin came out like to greet them, saw that my mom was kind of fussing getting me out of a car seat, and basically like sort of pushed her gently out of the way, grabbed me, put me under his overcoat, and ran me inside, and leaving my mom and dad to kind of get their stuff out of the car and like work their way into the house. So like it is a real feature of the landscape there, and I think it's so cool, like turning this this wind, which is supposed to make people and animals go crazy, into this source of kind of renewable cooling. It's so cool.
Totally. And there's like vents, like as you walk through the building, there's vents all over the building, and then depending upon which vents they open and which vents they close, they can direct the cool air to different channels throughout the building in different parts of the building, you know. So it's ancient technology, you know, but like totally repurposed for a modern setting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to be over there in November.
Cool. Oh yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so you'll be there. Like your timing will be better than mine.
In my history of winery construction projects, as far as I can tell, they always finish 48 hours before the harvest starts, because basically, like, as the harvest gets closer and closer, eventually, like, no, you are working 24 hours a day until that's done, because it is not going to be finished. The grapes start coming in.
Yeah. So because they know what they're doing, the grape receiving area, the fermentation area is all done. Right. I guess that was like priority number one, is like, let's get this done before the end of August, early September. So that part's ready to go. So they can hit the ground running. It's just like the auxiliary buildings have yet to be, you know, fully finished.
I mean, they did harvest there last year.
Oh,
like
yeah.
in the middle of.
Yeah, actually, yes, because it's a 3-year project. Yeah. So they've done 2 harvests there. Yeah.
Yeah, remarkable. Cool. So I'm sort of wondering, it sounded like you're talking about some of the additions to the cool, like, geeky Somm side of the portfolio. Like, is this your, like, restaurant Somm world coming full circle into this Vineyard Brands piece?
Yeah, I feel like we have to have, like, again, when Vineyard Brands was founded, like, bringing in Chateauneuf-du-Pape and Sancerre was, like, super novel, right? And then we had Coyeur, we had, like, Vouvray, like, way before these things were as kind of normalized by wine lovers in America. I want to get a little bit, like, not crazy, but I want to get a little bit of that Sommy stuff back from, like, top domains, like our domains in Burgundy, where there's not a lot of volume, there's no commercial pressure. It's like, hey, we make this much, you can have a little piece. And I want to get some of those wines in just to satisfy the nerds in our company, like myself, and then within our client base too, like satisfy their requests and needs. For sure.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I mean, I mean, my dad used to talk about how, like, the innovations that he had were not particularly in bringing in these domains, these high-end Burgundies and Bordeauxs. He said that was what people were doing at the time. He says his innovation was, first of all, encouraging those people to do things like estate bottling, and like giving them control and him control from beginning to end, and then pairing that with the brand side of things, which really had been an importer had either been a brand importer or it had been an estate importer, and tying the two together, he said he felt like that was what allowed them to get through a difficult periods in the 70s and 80s and be ready to grow. And I think a lot of the investment over the last couple of decades has been on the brand side of things. And I saw Greg start to pull the estate side of things back up in the last couple of years. And I'm excited to hear that that's a direction that you feel is worth continuing investing in.
For sure. And our brand side is so strong, and that's another reason why Vineyard Brands was so attractive to me initially, because some of our brands we've worked with for 40 years, and they're really strong in the U.S. They're really strong globally, so I have full confidence in them. So I don't feel that we need to add too much more weight to that side of the portfolio. Exactly as you said it, I feel like we can just minor tweaks here and there. We can have a really kind of niche-y, nerdy portfolio of great wines and really strong, great brands. So, I mean, your dad was a visionary.
I think I established that. So I just 2 more questions. One of them is, like, it seems like you have been on the road nonstop for the last year? Are you are you trying to visit every supplier? Like, is this a systematic? I need to do this at the front of my tenure to build these relationships kind of investment?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's I just want to get to suppliers who I've never been personally before to see their terroir, see their wineries, see the culture of where their wines come from, just to educate myself, but also to reassure them that this is the same Vineyard Brands that you've known and you've loved for a decade or 2 decades or 4 decades, and nothing's changing. And just, you know, we really value you and we value your partnership. So I want to make sure that they're comfortable and they're happy, and then that they know they have a direct line to me if they need it. So we have brand managers that kind of help oversee the immediate needs of our different winery partners throughout the world. But I want our suppliers to know, like, if they want to pick up the phone and call me, like, I want them to do that. I want them to feel comfortable to do that for sure. So it is systematic. I was trying to do it all in a year, but it's too many. So I think by like the end of the first half of next year, I'll be able to visit everybody between now and the end of the first half of next year.
And how many suppliers is that?
Oh, I think it's like 65 or 68 wineries, and then if that's if we don't subdivide it into brands, you know.
It's amazing.
Quite a few.
One last question, which again, like I would happily hang out and talk all day, but it has been half an hour. So, what if people want to learn more about Vineyard Brands? Like, what's the best way for them to do that? Or, and I guess answer at the same time, like, if they want to follow your own journeys as you are exploring all these places, is there a way for them to do that?
So for me, I just post on Instagram. I'm not a Luddite per se, but like TikTok is a little too edgy for me at my ripe old age. So Instagram is where I post my visits to our winery partners, and like most of the content on my page is wine specific and Vineyard Brand specific and our winery partner specific, which is that's like most of my life anyway. So I'm very happy for it to be that. But as far as Vineyard Brands is concerned, and learning more about the company, our website is actually it's like an industry-leading website as far as a resource to learn about the company, to learn about our suppliers, to learn about wine regions. We have videos, we have pronunciation recordings, we have maps. I think it's like an amazing resource. And as I travel the country, tons of distributors and distributor sales reps say they love our site because it gives them plenty of information to use in the market. But interestingly, I was just at Vinum, which is a biannual Austrian wine fair in Vienna, and a British importer who was tasting at the table next to me saw my name badge. And he said, "Oh, you work for Vineyard Brands. I love your website. When I sell wine to my clients in London, I go on your website to get information about the wines." So I like immediately was like, "Yeah, I guess we're doing something right," you know.
Awesome. And so that's vineyardbrands.com?
Yes, you got it. Yep.
And Vineyard Brands also on all the
Vineyard Brands on social too. Yep, exactly. Vineyard Brands on Instagram, Facebook. We have a YouTube channel as well.
Yep. Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I haven't checked that out.
You're on there, I'm sure.
Amazing. Patrick Bennett, thank you so much for taking a chunk out of your Wednesday afternoon to hang out and talk. I'm super excited for you. I'm super excited for Vineyard Brands to have you. And I hope I see you soon.
Thanks so much, Jason. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for having me, by the way, too. Happy to be here.
Totally my pleasure.
See you, brother.
Ciao. So thank you all the Tablas folks who have tuned in, as well as Patrick's followers and any Vineyard Brands folks who've tuned in. I will be back in 2 weeks. I have the British wine writer Matt Walls, who's probably the leading voice on Wines of the Rhone at the moment. He's going to be joining me in 2 weeks. So I hope you'll tune in for that. Cheers. Over and out.
Guys.